Marcus Cicero said that laws fall silent under times of war. In other words, people's rights, needs, hope, and privacy are basically gone during times of war, and government and security forces aren't there to enforce them or to protect those rights for them. That's exactly what's happening in Syria today. For the past 5 years, there's this ongoing war in Syria, and as college students, we should know not only what's happening around us in close proximity, but what's happening around the whole world. In order to understand what's happening in Syria, I'm going to break it down in 3 parts. We're going to talk about how it all started, and who's actually affiliated in the war, and how that war has impacted the lives of those who live in Syria today. So first we need to ask ourselves, how did the war in Syria initially begin? It all started with 15 teenagers who wrote revolutionary slogans on a school wall, so those slogans that opposed the views of the president and the government. And they were arrested and tortured. This led to a bunch of pro-democracy protests to occur in March 2011. However, security forces shot them all down and killed a lot of them. This then erupted a bunch of nationwide protests and opposition structures to form. After more chaos and violence, a bunch of rebel groups started to form and to battle government forces. Now that we discussed how it initially began, we have to ask ourselves who are actually involved in the war. To paraphrase Julian Scorthian, who wrote the article Syria, Who's Fighting Who, she said that there's a misconception that a lot of people have that they think that the war in Syria is between like 2 groups. And although that's kind of true, people who oppose the president and people who support the president, there's a bunch of little groups here and there and branches, and it's very multi-layered and complex. For example, the first opposition structure to be formed was the Free Syrian Army. And at first they were just people who would come together and talk about protests. However, more chaos and violence occurred during the Syrian uprising. More people were taking it upon themselves to defend themselves with weapons in order to defend themselves from government and security forces. And this led to more chaos and more violence, and this influenced a lot of other rebel groups to form. For example, the ISIS and Al-Nusra Front are 2 enemies in Syria, and ISIS actually controls nearly half of Syria today. Now that we discussed how the war in Syria began and who's actually involved, we can discuss how the war initially just impacted the whole lives in Syria. The civil services in Syria have been cut short for people who live there, so a lot of the fuel and gas shortages are in Syria, so a lot of people there are sometimes left without any heat, electricity, food, or water. Another problem that has impacted the lives is the military expenses from the war. It kind of influenced a lot of the prices that happens in Syria. So a lot of the food and water people can barely afford there. So there's a lot of people there that are starving. There's a lot of people here in the United States who are trying to send food aid to people in Syria as well. Another thing is that a lot of their privacy and rights are taken away, so people have been detained for suspicion, their homes have been raided for no reason, and it's not just the government doing that, it's also the rebel groups. A lot of Syria has fallen under the control of the rebel groups, criminal gangs, and tribes. And another thing is that all of this together has led those people to seek refuge. So they have fled the country to nearby places like Turkey. And not only has that influenced their lives personally, starting a new way, a new life, but it has also influenced the country like Turkey as well, like their economy and stuff like that. So now that we finished talking about who started, how the war started, and how that war impacted the lives, and how who actually is affiliated in the war, we need to see that a lot of their rights have been taken away, and just like Marcus Cicero said, that laws do fall silent under the war. The government there is not really doing anything to protect or enforce their rights, and in order to aid them or help them. And as college students, we should really recognize that so we can at least aid them or send any help that they need.